No electronic equipment until it's a little older. Thanks, Tori. Thank you. Oh. Me without coffee running a meeting? Oof. Not pretty. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's fine, and I'll just use the green one. Yeah, no problem. Okay, no problem. No problem. So it's actually broadcasting now. Hey, Carol. Hey, Amy. Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment or so. Yeah, we'll be looking. It's great today. I know other people will be arriving as we get started, but want to, first of all, as we begin our meeting, first want to just recognize and acknowledge just the number of folks who are outside this morning receiving food, and to our HopeNet volunteers who are members of our congregation who faithfully every Saturday morning show up to serve the more than 100 families. 107 families this morning, which is just amazing. Let's give them a round of applause and show our appreciation. The whole idea of the forum before the congregational meeting came about a few years ago when we started this process as a way of dealing with issues that may have come up at the congregational meeting in advance, so that we weren't having congregational meetings that were taking 5, 6, and 7 hours, but we were having congregational meetings that we were able to go into them as educated and as informed as we possibly could do. So we acknowledge that not everybody who's going to be at the congregational meeting is here today. We do acknowledge that there are viewers, folks of our own congregation who are watching online this morning. And if during the meeting, if they have questions, they can text those questions to 323-868-4658. That's 323-868-4658. And those text messages will be coming in either on my phone or on the iPad so that we can include them in the conversation. This also means that when we get to the congregational meeting, we don't have a lot of discussion time. So it's really incumbent on members that if they want questions asked or answered, to deal with them now, or if they've watched the broadcast, to deal with them by email before we get to the congregational meeting next week. And it makes the meeting so much smoother. It was something that the denomination did as a part of their structure for our general conferences, and it really did and does make the business meeting much smoother, much better informed, and people have the answers to the questions before we actually get to the congregational meeting. So I appreciate you all being here this morning. Posted online this week was the the budget for 2015, and also on the same page the budget that we passed for 2014. There was the annual report, and there are some hard copies of the annual report as well as hard copies of the budget proposals. And then there is another document that the lay delegates produced for us for this meeting, and that document is with regard to the two upcoming issues within the denomination: the election of new elders that will be appointed by the moderator of the denomination. That will be happening by the end of this year with an election in the new year. And then the other document is also the process that the denomination is using for the election of the selection and election of the new moderator that will be elected in 2016 at our general conference in Victoria in Canada. So those are the other two documents that you have to help keep us informed, not just what we're doing locally, but also what is actually happening globally within our denomination around those two specific issues. So this morning, we'll draw your attention first of all to the annual report. The annual report basically outlines the state of the church, gives you we've done something a little different this year. We used to have reports from the Minister of Congregational Life, the Minister of Congregational Care, and the other departments. As we continue to transform our church size-wise, all that happens beyond Sunday worship is church programming. So you will see that the heading is church programming. It's still divided up into sections, but we thought it was really important that the church began to understand that staff are programming. That staff, when we talk about how much of our money is going to programming, staff is programming. So without the staff, there is no programming. And so staff are part of the programming costs of the church. So we thought it was really important that we started to get our ideas into that mindset that staff are part of the programming of the church. So you'll see as we go through the church programming divided up into different sections in line with the Get Connected brochure. Congregational care, which of course is another part of the programming of the church. La Iglesia Fundadora de la Comunidad Metropolitana de Los Angeles, our Spanish-speaking community, part of our programming. Through church music, again, more of our church programming. The live broadcasts and our viral ministry. Then, of course, our lay delegates report, and then some blank pages for you to write notes if you wish to. And then on the back, the current list of board of director members, with Rose Yeager's last name spelt incorrectly. So please note that correction. And then, of course, the church staff listed below. And then, of course, we have hundreds of key volunteers who just do so much work and who make this machine move far more effectively than we could ever do with just the staff that are part of the official staff of the church. Key volunteers who are also treated as staff that are now part of the ongoing vision and mission and working of the local congregation. So there's a lot of information here and a lot of people who make a lot of things happen. And of course, many of those are the folks who are sat right in front of us this morning and the folks who are watching the broadcast from wherever they are. So as senior pastor, my absolute heartfelt appreciation to absolutely everybody who does absolutely anything to make Founders MCC what it is and what it is continuing to transform to be. I did want to just also, before we go into the agenda for this morning, I did just acknowledge the number of folks who do now share with us beyond the four walls of the church through our live broadcasts on a Sunday morning. We have strategically over the last few months been carefully monitoring where people are coming from and where they're viewing from. And we can tell you now that every week at least 4 other countries besides the US participate in live worship on Sunday morning. That's not those who watch YouTube afterwards or watch it as an archived broadcast. That goes into the hundreds. But the people who actually watch live on a Sunday morning, there are at least 4 other countries every single week. And there are at least 10 other states from the United States who are watching us every single week. That to me is just an incredible testimony to what we are doing through our live broadcast ministry. And we have been deliberately now adding all of those viewers to our database so that we can start building relationship with them, specifically through the weekly newsletter, but also through our iCare hours, and really being deliberate about how we connect with those folks who aren't physically in the building, and specifically those folks who are not in Los Angeles. So I just wanted to let you know that as we begin, so that we understand that we are much bigger than just what we see on a Sunday morning, and that we do really have a passion and I hope a vision for being more than just an LA-based church, but also an international voice as people become aware of and reconnect with Founders MCC. So if you want to go to the agenda on the inside of the front page, we're going to run through what will happen next week. And so, of course, we'll open with prayer, which we'll do in just a few moments. We will check for quorum. The way which we do this in this congregation is that as folks arrive for worship on Sunday morning, for our 10 o'clock service next Sunday, not this Sunday, people are asked to sign in, and that's how we confirm our quorum. And so that we check our quorum that way. And it has to be, if I remember rightly from the bylaws, and Onetta Brooks will correct me if I'm incorrect, but I believe it's 20% of our membership. Our membership currently stands at 314. So I think that's about 68 people that need to be present. 20%? How many? 62? Even better. 62 people need to be present in order for us to conduct business. And of course, quorum only has to be attained at the beginning of the meeting. If people choose to leave after the meeting has begun, that does not affect our quorum. So if by the end of the meeting there's only 30 people left, we've still attained quorum because quorum is achieved at the beginning of the meeting. And that's how it's done. So quorum will be confirmed by the board of directors. They will confirm with the clerk, and the clerk will confirm with the meeting that we have attained quorum. We'll then review the State of the Church report, which is in the annual report, and then we'll affirm the entirety of the annual report. This is the State of the Church report, the annual report. So we will affirm the annual report, and then what happens with this annual report, just so folks know, obviously we file a copy here for our archive and for our own legal purposes. A copy then goes to the state for the filing there, and then a copy goes to our denomination to file our annual report with the denomination. The denomination usually asks for annual reports in January from local congregations, and we always get ours in usually in November, so we're just a little ahead of the game. But the reason why we get it in is because we have an annual report that we produce, and not every congregation does that. So our annual report will go to the denomination, and it gets filed with them as well. We'll then review the annual congregational minutes for October 2013, and there'll be copies of those on the website, and there'll be moved and seconded by the congregation, and then they'll be approved. And then, of course, that becomes our legal document that says that we had a meeting last year. Part of our 501c3 legalization is that you have to have an annual congregational meeting. It's part of our bylaws. That satisfies that legal entity, as well as making a record for ourselves that we had a congregational meeting in 2013. We'll then move to the election of officers to serve on the board of directors. We are not electing any new lay delegates this year. Under our denominational structure, lay delegates are elected by the congregation at the congregational meeting following a general conference. And our next general conference is until 2016. So our lay delegates serve for 3 years. We're entitled, under our denominational bylaws, to 1 lay delegate for every 100 members or part thereof. So we're at 314. So technically we're allowed 4 lay delegates. We have 3, and we've kept 3. And if we have a huge increase before we get to General Conference in 2016, the board can then nominate and appoint another lay delegate to serve as a voting member at the General Conference, or the congregation can vote somebody else in. What has happened in the past is usually if there's a vacancy in either position, either lay delegate or board members, the board has been able to appoint until the next scheduled congregational meeting. And we do have another congregational meeting before the General Conference, so if we're at 360, 370 members, we may choose to elect a new lay delegate to serve, to be our voice at General Conference in 2016. As far as those who have so far been nominated to serve on the board of directors, we have 5 applications. Applications were extended, or rather the deadline for applications was extended until 5 o'clock next Wednesday. That was done at the action of the board of directors this past Thursday. So we have 5 folks who have been nominated or have nominated themselves for election. And let me just grab those. All 5 applications have met the standards of our bylaws. Once our process is that once a person has been affirmed that they are eligible to stand for the board of directors, then next week they go through a police screening, a background check, and those background checks will take place next week. And that's the final piece. We don't do background checks until we've affirmed that they're actually eligible to stand. So background checks will be done next week, and provided nothing comes up in the background check, then they'll be presented on the ballot for next Sunday. And each person has signed to say we can do that, so we're not doing it behind their back. So the 5 folks who are currently on the ballot right now are Ernesto Amaya. He's a member of the Spanish-speaking congregation. Jenny Nichols, who is a regular member and attender of our 11 o'clock service. Not that it really matters which service they attend, but sometimes it's just nice to know where they sit in the church. Dr. Stefan Scoggins, who's a regular attender and member of our 9 o'clock service. Sheldon Cabrera Miller, who some of you will know sits on our soundboard pretty often. And then Susan Horn, who is often up in the, actually not often, always up in the broadcast room. And Jenny and Susan are here this morning. And we don't have a requirement that board members have to be present or nominations have to be present. Their applications are online, and you can go and view their applications at any time, and feel free to approach them or to ask them any questions personally if you wish to. We do know that one person next week will not be present physically here. Ernesto, actually had a vacation already booked with his husband, and so he has a short video that we can play. At the meeting next week, we will give each candidate that's present an opportunity to speak, and we give them opportunity this morning to speak to the forum. So I'm going to pause there, and you can find it out between yourselves whether Jenny or Susan wants to go first. But if you want to say something beyond what's on your application or just to affirm what's on your application, we welcome that. If you don't want to, that's also fine. There will be opportunity next week, up to 2 minutes, and then questions for up to 2 minutes as well. Susan, you want to say something? And then I'll ask Jenny if she does as well. Or Susan, could you use that mic? That's right. It's being broadcast and you're already on. I know, it's that big thing, big green thing.
Is this on?
Yep.
I don't really have too much to add. I was a member of the board from 2008 to 2012. During that time, I served as clerk 1 year and vice moderator another year. I practiced law as an attorney for over 25 years. I think that came in handy when we bought this building, and I was involved with the lease negotiations for the preschool and for the prior congregation. I think my legal expertise and education is a valuable tool to the board, and I would like the opportunity to serve again. So I don't have much more to add. It is if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Susan.
I, too, am a former board member running for another term. I was a board member back from 1990 to 94, some 3-year span within that period. I think it's a wonderful testament to this church, to this denomination, to this congregation, that several of us who have had this opportunity are seeking to do it again. I'm excited. I'm excited to be back involved with the church, and I look forward to being able to serve you.
Any questions for Jenny? Then to show our appreciation to Jenny. So as I say, we have 5 applications so far. Applications will close at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Any new applications will be updated to the website. Everything that's, everyone who has applied so far is already up there. So please do go to the website. Just click on that big button that says important information about the Congregational Forum and Meeting. And then everything is listed there that you can go and read at your leisure, including the annual report, including the budget, including the resumes of all of the board of director members. Everything is up there, so it's really, really incumbent on us to use that information as a way of, and there are hard copies if folks really do need them. So we try to cut down on trees as much as possible, and try to be as green as possible in this process. That's a good question. So the question was, how many openings are there on the board? There are 5 openings on the board. Usually there are 4. We're a congregation that elects for 2 years on a 2-year basis. So 1 year we elect 4 people, the following year we elect 4 people, and it's always on a rotation. So there's always 4 people cycling off. The reason why there are 5 this year is because we had a vacancy at the end of the last congregational meeting. And so the board was left with the duty of appointing a new board member. We appointed Dennis Herzik, who had also been on the board previously. And Dennis has served faithfully for this year and is not seeking election. And that's not a testimony to how bad it is. But it's just, but he did, he was eligible to stand, but had decided not to. So the folks that are leaving the board at this point, first of all, it will be Ina Serene Cohen, who's been our treasurer for a long, long time and is actually termed out, so is not eligible to stand for re-election. Our terms are two full 2-year terms, and then you have to be off the board for a full term, which is 2 years before you're eligible to re-stand for election. So that's the way we have understood our bylaw, and that's how we enact it. The other folks who are coming off the board will be Dawn Robinson, Rosalie Yeager, Vianney Ramirez, Dennis Herzik. That's it? That's five, yeah. So Michael Sutherland has, yep, yep, and they all have, yeah, and along with me, yeah. And those folks have another year, and then at the 2015 annual congregational meeting, actually the only folks who will be, Michael Sutherland will be termed out. He would have served 2 full terms, and then Don, Tracy, and yeah, they're on the Tracy were the only ones left. Yes. And the way we do that, Rose, is that when the votes are cast, usually it's the person with the least votes that still meet the 50% plus 1 will get the 1-year term, and everyone else will get the 2-year terms. So there'll be 4 2-year terms and 1 1-year term. Is that clear as mud? Awesome. So any questions so far? And if you do, I know that we're all in the room, but there are people who aren't in the room, so if we would use the mic, that would be really helpful. So let's start with any questions about the annual report that you might have. And as I say, if there aren't, don't worry if there aren't, and if you feel like there are some during the week, please feel free to email. We do want to try and make sure that we answer all your questions before we get to the congregational meeting. Susan? Yes. Because they can see what that we've done. We're using the switch, so they can see us even though we can't see ourselves right now. Yeah, I checked online to make sure. Okay. Hopefully you'll find it's a very comprehensive report. Gives us a lot of information about where we are and where we're going. So I'm guessing that we want to move to the financial report, which is usually the thing that we all want to look at. So Ina does an incredible job. The way that we do our finances, again, I just want to, just for transparency purposes, offerings on Sundays are called for usually by a board member on duty or a lay delegate. We added the lay delegates to the rotation basis at last year, and it's been helpful to have our lay delegates in front of the congregation more than just by name. And so the offering is called for by the lay delegate or the board member. What happens then is that the board member, once the offering is received and prayed over, the board member will leave with the usher. The usher and the board member will then take it to the office. And then after services, the offering is accounted. And the offering is accounted as a standard rule by 2 board members or a board member and a lay delegate. If a second board member or lay delegate can't be found, a board member or a lay delegate can find another person that they trust to count the offering. And the reason we do not allow anyone to count the offering on their own is for legal and security purposes. So the offerings are counted. They're placed onto a calculation sheet, and those calculation sheets are then signed by the 2 people who counted the money. It is then deposited into the church safe, where it stays until Monday morning. On Monday morning, the safe is opened, and the offerings are then counted again by a 3rd person, and that's by the office administrator. The office administrator will then verify that what the count from the board members was correct, and then it is moved to the banking process. The banker then counts it another time. So the offerings are actually counted 4 times for complete verification. And then it is entered into our database system called Servant Keeper, and Servant Keeper then validates that what we have counted is actually correct. So Servant Keeper counts it a 5th time. And then it goes to the bank, and then the bank count it one more time to verify that all of those processes have worked. I feel that that is a really good system. I think it's a transparent system, and I think it's a system that helps the congregation to be reassured that all the way through this process, their money, their gifts, their offerings, their tithes are being handled in the most professional and correct way. Once the banking is done, a banking sheet as an overall banking then goes to our CPA bookkeeper, Michael Lavelle, and Michael Lavelle then does all of the accounting processes. He's a contract member of staff, and he does all of the financial reports, he does all of the QuickBooks operations, he does all of our end-of-year filings, he does the payroll, he does absolutely everything from the financial end, and then reports all of that to the church treasurer. So we've been really, really lucky for the last few years because Ina also has an eye for figures in the same way that Walter did for many, many years before Ina. And Ina and Michael basically work as a team. But Michael basically reports the finances to Ina as the treasurer, and the treasurer then makes the report to the board of directors. And so when we are appointing a new treasurer in 2015, yes, it would be great to have someone who has a financial background, but it's not necessary because the bookkeeper and the CPA are the people who actually run the books and reports it to the treasurer. The treasurer then does the verification. And this year, the board of directors, under the guidance of the Congregational Meeting, approved and appointed an independent financial examiner who are currently doing an audit. It's not an audit in the sense of a huge audit, it's an independent financial examination. And Jeffrey Corrigan are running a special audit on our books from the last audit to current, so that they can produce a report that says all of our financial processes are correct. And again, we believe that that's an important thing for the church and for the members to know, because money is the one thing that people like to know. Everything is top notch. So that's how we do our bookkeeping system. It may sound complicated, but I do believe it's the correct way of doing it. And so that's the background. So here we are. We're going to look first of all at 2013. Now, for those who were not here in 2013, just a quick bit of information. When we sat here last year and we looked at the budget for 2014, we were seriously overspending. Seriously overspending. Some of that was because we had, at that point, 2 campuses for some part of the year, although not for all of the year. Some of it was because when we moved from Franklin to here, we had ongoing expenses that were, we had not built up the congregation again from leaving from Franklin. Anyone who knows that when you leave one building and move to another, you lose some people. Some people, even half a mile is too far to come. When we moved from West Hollywood to Los Feliz, that we took a pretty good chunk, but we lost some people too. So the congregation said to the board that they would approve the budget for 2014 with some provisos, and I'll get to that when we get to 2014. But let's look at 2013 to start with. So this is the year-end summary. So again, for those of us who have been around long enough, we know, but for those of us who haven't, just some clarity information for you. Our bookkeeping system runs January to December, so we run a calendar year. our congregational meeting is in October. So we are not able to produce a full year of accounts at our congregational meeting for the year that we're in because we're only 10 months into it. So we always approve the year before. So last year we approved the year end 2012, and we saw where we were at 10 months for 2013. So at the 2014 congregational meeting, we now will be able to vote on the entirety of 2013. We'll see 10 months of 2014 so that we get an idea of where we're at. And that's our cycle. So for 2013, you will see that our total income was $539,295.88. That was made up of two pieces. Our total income through tithes, offerings, facilities, anything that comes in to the local church. And $50,140.67 was from our investments. That's the money that we have in investments, and we get a dividend every month. Some people would call it an endowment. We don't call it an endowment yet because we have not made it an endowment, so it's still an investment. And that was the income from 2013 on our monies invested at that point was Merrill Lynch. And so our total income for the year was $539,295.88. Our total expenses, however, for 2013 was $653,103. I don't know how it became $103 straight with no cents, but it did. But it was right on the nail at $653,103. And so you'll see we overspent in 2013 by $113,807.12. And you know, when we came to the congregation as a board, we made a commitment. I think it was Carol who asked the board to make a commitment to start to think about producing balanced budgets. And the congregation approved the budget with the proviso that if after the first quarter of 2014 we were not making income and our expenses were still racking up $10,000, $20,000 a month over budget, that we would call an extraordinary general congregational meeting for the congregation to review the budget and to decide where cuts were going to be made. And we made that commitment as a congregation, and the board took that very seriously when we went into 2014. The good news was that when we came to the first quarter, we had not only made budget, but we were actually, our expenses were well under control. So, any questions about this slide, first of all? And if you could go to the mic, sorry.
Is part of that overage in the budget because we had the two campuses? Is that what was causing the overage for us in that year?
Part of it was the overages. Part of it was the ongoing remodeling that we were doing in our building, and that's a whole separate budget now. Some of it was because we didn't raise from illuminations what we were hoping to raise from illuminations. And just on that note, just to let you know that plans are underway to move illumination from here to the back wall to make it more accessible to folks who want to have their name put up on it. It's a response to some of the congregation who said, we really want to, but we can't see it. And so we're planning to move the illumination from there to the back wall so that it does become more accessible and hopefully more visible to folks who want to buy one of the memorial plaques. And we'll find something else to put there, but we're responding to congregational need. So that will be happening in 2015. If you could, James.
I'm curious about the investment income, and is there a certain percentage every year that goes into that, or how is that sum arrived at?
Yeah. Basically, the board Because it's not an endowment yet, the board is allowed to use the dividend income to supplement the budget, but it doesn't touch the capital. So the capital remains. That was changed in 2014. We're now 2014, right? It was changed in 2014 to allow the board to spend $1 million of our investment account on the complete overhaul and remodel of the building. So that means the air conditioning, all of the downstairs, and you know just everything that's now taking place. So we were allowed to spend $1 million. That was our budget for this remodel, and we're pretty close to it. So we were allowed. So our dividend income in 2014 has gone down because we've taken money out gradually through the year. And we've been I think the board have been extremely careful about when they've taken that money out. They've only taken it out when it's needed to pay bills. And we have a separate accounting for all that's been spent in 2014 on the remodel. And we'll be producing that to the congregation as soon as, once that's all completed, so that they can see where we spent the money and what it was. And most of it's on construction equipment and all sorts of things. But $1 million.
Did we have that much debt at the end of 2013, or how did we make up the difference between our income?
Yep. We took it out of the investment income, so out of the actual capital, because it's not an endowment right now. There are no rules about what we can take in and out. Once the remodel is finished, and then there'll be a conversation about the mortgage that we owe to Mount Hollywood Congregational Church. Once all of that is complete, there is a move on the board to move the money that's left to an endowment, so that it is then protected, and that and then hopefully each year to start paying back into the endowment to start building it back up again.
So you didn't have any
We
debt
had no
moving
debt.
into 2014 that you
No.
had to catch up?
No.
I thought you answered James' question that the board only used the income and didn't touch the capital. But then you just told me the opposite.
No, I said when we go to the endowment, we will do. This
Oh.
year we have not. We have only used the only capital we've used from the investments this year is for the remodel.
Okay.
We have not had to use capital to pay bills, which we did in 2013. And that was really, Carol, your instructions to the board really was, so we really have tried to honor, we really have honored that discussion at the congregational meeting last year. I know Anita has a question, so I'm just pausing. It is good exercise.
Although 2014 is not over, this is a projection, I know, we haven't talked 2014 yet.
Yep.
And I know you're projecting a 1,700 profit, no loss, could be bucks. My short story is, you're projecting that there are no unexpected expenses such that you would have to go to the investment, dividend, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay.
That's our hope.
Hope it's good.
And we can
Hope-
look at 2014 figures now if you want to.
Okay, I'll wait for that.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to my seat now. This is good. I can keep running.
So, we ready for 2014? Okay. But just remember these figures when you look at 2014. So this is the 10 months ending the end of September. So that's 9 months, right? Sorry. 9 months ending the 30th of September. So our total income for those 9 months has been $422,206.76. Our total expenses $426,226.10. So to date, we have overspent by $4,019.34, which is a huge difference. Yeah, I think the board deserves a round of applause for that. I'm having new messages. Just bear with me a second. They're from AT&T thanking me for contacting them last week. It's very kind of them. Would I like to take a survey? Not right now. So that's where we are at the end of 9 months. We have 3 more months to go. The board is projecting that we'll probably continue to overspend by a little each month, but certainly not by the $113,000 that we overspent in 2014. Lucia. Sorry, darling. We'll give you time. Gives me time to have a quick sip of my water.
I'm not smart enough to do the math in my head. Has anybody tried prorating this year's income to see how close we are on track for making it by the end of the year?
Yep. So let me just back up and just let you know that actually September this month accounts for nearly $4,000 of that. So right up until the end of August, we were basically equal. September, we took a little bit of a dip. So we're hopeful that we can make it up in the last three months of this year. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments for us. But yeah, I know I'm telling the truth, right? Yeah, she's there. She's giving me the little firming eye there. But yes, for the first 8 months, we were basically, it was kind of like this, but we were kind of flat. And then September took a little dip. And I will explain why in just a few moments.
I have a question suggestion. We're seeing 9 months right here.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward for future congregational meetings, is there also a way of showing us what the projected 12 months ending, not knowing what those 3 months are going to be, but having an idea what we would spend in 3 months to see a 12-month snapshot with that projection of where we would be in December, even though we're still in October?
I think Ina's going to tell us right now.
So this would be, as you see, this is just an estimate based on these numbers. So the total income will be $530,000 approximately. If you look at the breakdown, designated income would be $15,000, and I missed this facility. We're going to get $61,000, which I think is incredible in terms of diversification of income, much more than we had in the old campus. $61,000 is still a lot of money. And once phase 2 is completed, that can only go up. Fundraising is $5,000. Tithes and offering is pretty even at $400,000 for the year, and dividend income about approximately $49,000. So that gives us $531,000 compared to that number.
We're projecting probably a deficit of around 10,000. About 10,000 by the end of the year. Yeah. Now, of course, that could change. Somebody could put a large check in the offering, and that changes everything. But when you consider from 113,000 to 10,000, that's a huge way in which the board and I'll take some credit, has been able to monitor the income and expenses to ensure that month by month we adhere to what the congregation asked of us in 2013 as we moved into 2014. Yep. So as we reduced income, we reduced expenses. That was just the way that's good stewardship, and it's good housekeeping. Sorry, Lucia, I keep making you go to the microphone. You might want to sit closer. I think that, yeah, I think it's where the broadcast is, sorry.
I know I can't make I can't make it all the way to the internet. Do you have something that says what was cut? Like a list of things that were,
Yep.
items that were reduced?
Yep. So the primary things that we did was that we started to look at where could we make some cuts. A very simple one. One of the things that we did was that we started to lock up the toilet rolls. I'm just going to be, we used to put toilet rolls out, and people took them, and so we were going through toilet rolls at a huge rate because people would put them in their bags and go home with them, and so we bought toilet roll holders where you actually have to unlock them to put the toilet rolls in, and suddenly our toilet roll and paper towel bill went down incredibly. So all the way from that to looking at, eliminating one member of staff, the church administrator, we eliminated at the first quarter of the year. And then, of course, we eliminated J.D. Sebastian 2 months ago. And the board allowed me to begin to be creative about those positions and to start using contract staff for those positions. Contract staff are very different than full-time or even part-time members of staff because of the way in which payroll is done. And also what we did was that we started to look at what are the functions of those jobs and how can we use those functions more appropriately. So I have to say to people like Keith Minan and PJ Escobar and Larry Rodriguez, who have been and continue to be technically staff even though they are unpaid until the 1st of October when we actually put PJ Escobar on a contract for admin. We did not have payroll, health, state taxes on those members of staff for that duration of time, which does account for why this month, September, we went over because we had to start employing contract staff to take up the slack on what other staff had been taking on in a short-term interim time. So we have taken on, and I can give you the list of who those people are so that you know, for clarity's sake. In fact, let's wait till we get to the budget, and it's very clear there what we have done. But I really sincerely want to thank those 3 key people specifically who just did over and above what they needed to do and to run the admin side of the church ever since Louis Sagastuni left the staff earlier this year. So could you show them your appreciation? And the other person I want to just call out is Oyi. Oyi comes to this church every Thursday. For those of us who have ever been in the church office, we use a data system called Servant Keeper, and every year we have this conversation about what can Servant Keeper do, what can't it do, and not one person has been able to really master that apart from data input, which Keith does extremely well. Oyi lives for databases. Lives, breathes, eats databases. And so I asked Oyi if she would come in one day a week, and do the kind of reporting that I needed out of Servant Keeper to help us continue the growth pattern that we're on. And within 2 Thursdays, she began to produce reports for me that I've not been able to have in 13 years. And that's nobody's fault. Servant Keeper is not an easy system. But she would download the information into Excel and into Access, and she would manipulate it, and she would love it, and she would gently massage it. And she would just say, oh no, I need to do something more with this. And she just gives me reports every Thursday of the kind of reporting that I need to help us with congregational care, to help us with congregational life, to help us with donor relationship, and she does that every Thursday. And I'll give you just one very, very quick example. You know, we've always had a trouble purging our roles, our membership roles, because we print the membership list and then we send it out to the staff and we say, have you seen this person? I mean, it's just a crazy system. I said to Oyi, according to our bylaws, members are no longer are considered inactive members if they do not participate in worship or they don't give on a regular basis, and that that they have to do 2 of 4 things. But through Servant Keeper, these are 2 things that we need to know. And so I said to Oye, I said, I need to know people who have not attended worship in 6 months and or not given anything through the offering in the last 6 months. And loved it, breathed it, manipulated it, got it to me. And that now goes to the clerk so that the clerk doesn't have to start thinking, well, did we see John Smith 3 weeks ago, or did we not see, Henrietta Alvarez? Because Servant Keeper now, through the data input, through the manipulation, and through the reporting system, is able to give us that information. And it's streamlined our work in a way that we could not, it's almost unbelievable. So great appreciation to Oyi. And thanks to Cademan for looking after Sophia. So any questions of the year to date? Okay. So we'll be just we won't vote on this particular slide next week. We'll just receive it because obviously it's not a year end. It's only a 9-month period. So this is the proposed budget for 2014. We are not looking to reduce our income on tithes and offerings, even though we would not have actually attained the 500,000 in 2014. We're remaining the tithes and offerings flat. We don't think it's necessarily a good thing to show a reduction in our projected income for 2015 on tithes and offerings, so we're just remaining it at 500,000. 2015, sorry. It says 2014, right? Yeah, it should be 2015. I'll make sure that's corrected before next week. Our other income, including investments, is 200,000. So we're projecting an income of 700,000 for 2015. And you're going to say to me, how on earth can we increase our, if we're going to get close to 550,000 by the end of 2014, how on earth can you project an income of 700,000 in 2015? So let me try and unpack it a little bit for you. And you'll see this on the proposed budget. So the 4 main categories that we have for income are designated income, facilities, fundraising, tithes and offerings, and then our other income, which is usually our dividend income. Again, not touching the capital once it becomes an endowment, but at the moment, our dividend income. And you'll see in 2014 what we proposed, and then in 2015, there's a kind of a major adjustments to those figures. Our designated income, we're reducing to 25,000 because that's more in line with what we have received in 2014. The facilities, however, goes up from 50,000 to 135,000. And we know that at the end of 2014, our facilities income will be around about 65,000. So we actually have 15,000 above what we proposed in 2014 if we continue this year as we know it is. The reason why we're recommending an increase to 135,000 is because, of course, by January 1, the lower level will be complete. And herein lies the conundrum. Because I know that some folks are anxious about getting downstairs. And I know that downstairs will be our major income bearer from here on in. So as a congregation, we have to make the decision. Are we going to use the lower level of our building to reduce income, which frees up money for ministry and programming? Or are we going to say, no, that lower level is just for us, and therefore have to reduce our budget drastically because expenses will be out of control? So what we have done as a board, or what the board has instructed me to do, and I've followed through on the instructions, is that we have recruited 2 people to start working with us at the end of November. One is an expert in theater management, and the other is an expert in commercial kitchens. And so we are working with both of those individuals to begin to fill up those 2 spaces on a regular, ongoing basis, so that the theater will be used as a theater and the kitchen will be used as a commercial kitchen. That does not mean that we will not have access to that facility. What it does mean is that we will have to calendar along with everything else that happens in that facility. And we can't just assume that we can go down and use the kitchen whenever we feel like. Or we can go and use the theater whenever we feel like. Because those both spaces are major, not only major capital investments, but they're also major income bearers. We have the potential to raise more than $2,000 a week in rent in that lower level when it's used properly, which is a huge amount of income to help us to produce more programming and more ministry. Now, if the congregation decides that's not what they want, then we have to reduce our income line, and then we have to start looking at our expenses and saying one of 2 things. Either we're going to allow the board to take money out of our capital on a regular basis to continue to draw a zero budget, or we're going to have to cut some of the programming of the church. And those are decisions we have to make strategically as a congregation. The board is saying, and I agree with them, that we should maximize the potential of the income from downstairs, not negating that we want to use that facility, but to maximize the income so that we can release it into programming of the church. Lucia. No, not at all. I don't have a problem with you. Ask the question.
It is a conundrum, and I'm not making any judgments or decisions, but the first thing that pops into my mind is we'd be raising more money for more programming, but we wouldn't have any place to put the more programming because we sold the extra space. And so that's what I'm juggling in my head.
And I think we can do both. One of the things that we are doing is the room that, the office that JD used to occupy is going to become a new meeting space, specifically for church programs. And so that's going to be temporarily called the upper room. And with an elevator, that gives us access to that room for everybody. I did not say that we would not have the use of the room downstairs. And I believe that we need to start believing that the theater that comes in is part of our programming, because that is bringing people to the building that would not necessarily come to a church. And so we have opened ourselves to a whole different group of people who will come to the building and who then might say, it's a church. I might come to the church. So if we could start to believe that that's part of our programming that we have as a church, that automatically increases our programming. And we will have access to it. We would just have to calendar it along with everybody else that gets to calendar down there. And then the kitchen will be managed by a professional catering company. And most of the kitchen caterers usually cater during the day and are out catering in the evening. But they need professional kitchens, and that is a professional kitchen down there. That really can't just be used by anybody anyway. I think what will happen is once we get more money in, we'll be able to do the things that we want to do.
So my question, given this, and you projected in 2015 some dates, what are the dates and occasions already that you considered for the church for occasions in 2015 that you've calendared in such that we can use for the kitchen, be it anniversary, I'm going to give you a hint, anniversary or whatever. And I realize, it sounds all good, that the challenges that obviously will come will time of day, calendaring, projections, parking, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, then there comes people in the church who may have, for some reason, decide to have a wedding and want to have something downstairs and there's a kitchen. So could you tell me what's already calendared in for 2015?
So as far as theater space is concerned, most theater spaces are usually used for rehearsals during the week, and then would have theater Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So what we've negotiated with the theater manager is that it would be rehearsal space during the day, during the week, and then freed up for the evenings. Not for every evening, but for some evenings. But Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it would be theater space. And that would be Friday night, Saturday night, and a late afternoon matinee on a Sunday. So after the 1:30 service is over. Because whilst there is good soundproofing between the two areas, it's not perfect. Never will be. So parking is an issue everywhere in LA, and certainly here in Los Feliz. So those are the terms that we've agreed with them, and we're still coming up with a pricing schedule. That still means that we would have that space available. The lobby space, which when it becomes a theater, would be ours during the week and would be ours for use. As far as the kitchen is concerned, most of that is going to be Monday through Saturday. And mostly during the day, which is not when we're going to need the kitchen anyway. And then on Sundays, I think the truth is that not many of us are going to go out, down the stairs, and downstairs into the lower level to get coffee. Most of us are now going to be using the extended patio that we have out here as we have done for all these years. So I think that the kitchen is probably going to be used when we have special occasions, like anniversary, like board of directors dinner, like volunteer appreciation, and we will have a master calendar that we can negotiate into. And if you've got dates in your head right now, perhaps you can have them so that we can start getting them on the calendar. But we have the potential of income for our investment cannot be negated. And if the congregation choose not to do that, that's your, at the end of the day, it is the congregation's prerogative, then I really do need to ask the congregation to tell me where I cut expenses.
I didn't hear that last part.
Where to cut expenses.
Yeah, I want to say this. I just want to say that that news kind of disappoints me because we were really looking forward to the basement and the kitchen and more of our coming together, as a social group in the church. I feel that we should be able to count on at least some space that is just ours, and money doesn't have to be a big figure in everything we do, We can cushion some of the expenses of using it for like anniversary dinners and programs and tickets from musicals and things. But I really was looking forward to that being ours. The theater, the kitchen, that whole part. So I just wanted to say I'm a little disappointed, but so what?
And I want to make it very clear, I've not said that we're not using it. What I've said is that we need to find a way of co-sharing in the same way that we co-share this building now with all our 12-step meetings and with all of our other programs that we already have.
Would the second Sunday creative service be in that space? Would that be something that would be standing each month?
We would have to look at the calendar and see if it's possible.
My concern with the kitchen is that we have made do with that space without air conditioning, without refrigeration, without heat, ovens and everything else. We'd have a brand new kitchen downstairs and we would still be making do with that space. Is there anything on the books anytime soon? Because sooner or later somebody's going to get salmonella because it wasn't refrigerated.
Yeah. So let me just answer that question directly. First of all, the board at the Thursday meeting this week approved a budget for air conditioning for that whole side of the building. So as soon as the remodel is over, we will be putting air conditioning on that whole wing of that building over there, so that's a step forward. They're also then looking at how we can upgrade the chapel, and actually, quite honestly, taking out that nasty carpet and painting it would probably upgrade that chapel by 100%. And so that's another piece. And then the third piece is looking at what the facilities are in that Hunter room. And again, Roger, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not saying that we can't use the kitchen downstairs.
I really want to emphasize that we don't have proper refrigeration in that room. And someone is going to get sick if we don't make that a priority.
And there's no reason why we couldn't use the refrigeration downstairs.
It's a long way away.
It sure is. Yeah. Yep.
Kind of brings some questions about the food pantry, where we're going to put the food pantry, and if we rent out the kitchen for commercial use, will we still hold back some of the space for like if we decide to get refrigerated stuff for the food pantry, will there be space for the food pantry? Is that stuff that's being taken into consideration with this?
The food pantry actually has its own store downstairs.
Cool.
With a freezer.
Oh, cool.
Separate from the kitchen. Separate from the kitchen.
Let me just follow up on my earlier question. Help me with policy and process for the members, where customarily members have sometimes with scheduling access for weddings, funerals, memorials, et cetera, et cetera. ordinations, et cetera. How can you help me see, or what is the process for members having priority, that there are occasions other than calendaring, I understand some occasions you can calendar in. We won't go there. Help me with that priority so there's a sense of ownership that if a big event in their life comes, they can use the facilities.
Well, first of all, both the people that we're contracting with will be accountable to us. They're not independent. They're accountable to the church. And both of them are very much aware that the church has a priority in the scheme. There's not going to be every weekend that there's going to be plays going on downstairs. And so, they're accountable. They're working for me. They're working for us.
Okay.
So in conjunction with the facilities manager, we will have a really, really clear master calendar that we can get on. But, I know we can't schedule memorials. They happen. And we'll just have to then say, okay, how can we fit all this in?
Yeah.
In the same way that we do now, quite honestly. When we have something that happens here and we need to use the Ryland room, and we have to displace the groups that are meant to be in there to other locations in the building. So it's going to be a merry dance. It really is. And, it was 3 years ago when we moved from Franklin to here, and we had no space, and weren't able to do a thing, really. And here we are 3 years later, we're saturated again. What a problem to have.
Yeah.
Seriously, what a problem to have when we know that the congregation that was here last, had to leave because they couldn't do anything with it.
Right.
So I'm grateful for the problem.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that the members feel that sense.
It's a
of
good
ownership.
problem to have, and yet I think
Yep.
there's a sense of not necessarily ownership, but a sense of inclusion, and that
Yep.
significant events in one's life can be accommodated.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Annetta.
I think you clarified two of the points about the contractors for the theater and the kitchen, that they do report to the church. And I think on the other side of it too, I think when we designed the kitchen originally, it wasn't designed for particularly that purpose. I think we designed it in mind, because I sat on that committee, we designed it for multi-use for the church primarily, and then also for outside sources. So it wasn't that we were designing it so we couldn't use it ourselves. I think we did it where it was multifaceted, and we had that availability to use all of that space in an appropriate way within the congregation.
My question has to do with the facilities, but not their use, but the actual use of the money. Does the board contemplate, or will it contemplate, using even 3.5% of the yearly proceeds from the downstairs facility, putting it back into our investment funds? Because quite frankly, I don't think Illuminations is going to provide enough to begin to replenish our investment funds. Even 3.5% of the yearly total, at least that's something going back in that gives us a little more dividend money at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Just an aside, whenever we rent out that downstairs space to be used for theater or whatever, I think we have to be very careful about anything planned in this building by the congregation because of the parking situation. If there was a theater going on during a time when we wanted to have a lot of people here, it's hard enough to find parking on a Sunday. So anyway, just parking would be an issue.
What I will say, and I'm just going to say this now, is we have no problem with parking on a Sunday if we would park in the places that we're paying for. And I'm just going to say that out loud. If you decide not to park in the places that this church pays for parking on a Sunday, you cannot complain about not finding parking in this location. We have 2-3 parking lots that this church pays for on a Sunday. If you choose to park on the street, that really is your choice. But I go back to Dresden on a Sunday, maybe 7 or 8 of our cars have parked there. We have 40 parking spaces. within a block of this building. We have Bank of America within a block of this building. And if we choose not to park in those locations on a Sunday, that really is our responsibility. But I go back to those parking spaces and hardly any of us have parked in them, and then we complain because we can't find parking. I don't understand it. I understand that, but I want us to start using the parking that we're paying for. Really, that's what it's there for.
Look at the money we have if we didn't use residents.
Yeah. Sorry, I got a bit passionate about that. But I know how much we pay.
I have no idea resident existed.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had told me. I didn't know. I just happened to find out that I could park Bank of America. But I no, there's not. Well,
So,
yeah, the website.
well, and I'll just say this: it's on every publication we do. It's on Get Connected. It's in the bulletin. It's on the website. It's on the welcome that we give to the new people when they get here. It's like every piece of information we put out there says where the parking is. For that very reason, for that very reason, we don't want people to have to struggle on a Sunday to find parking. One of the other things that we're trying to do is to get negotiation during the week with the valet companies to reduce the rate to church people and to theatre goers, so that there are more off-road parking spaces. The average around here is about $5. We're trying to get that down to $3.50, which theatre goers do not mind paying. And we have a red line within 2 blocks of here, and public transportation that comes backwards and forwards all the way to the corner. So, yeah, I know parking's an issue everywhere in Los Angeles, and no less in this location. Yeah.
So I have 2 questions. Are we allowed to ask more than one?
You can ask
And
as
one
many as you
sitting.
like at the forum.
Well, one is if we are in control of the theater stuff that's happening downstairs, that's going to be happening, as congregation members, do we get a discount? If it's a good production, of course. And since we're talking about parking and attempting to have a lower rate. And the next is the reserving the spaces for calendaring, is that a Reverend Pat thing or is that a Jeffrey thing?
It will be a Jeffrey thing.
Okay.
That will work through the master calendar.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
not a Reverend Pat thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as reduced rates are concerned, let's go back to that one. Because I'll answer your second question first. So here's the policy that's been set by the board and congregation, is that we do not charge members for the use of the sanctuary for weddings or memorials. We never have done. We do, however, say that if you want sound or light or broadcast or any of those facilities, then you need to pay the people that you employ to run sound, to run lights, to run, but we do not charge you for the facility because you're a member of the church and you give through your tithes and offerings. There has been no yet set policy about what that's going to look like for downstairs. And it's certainly on the board's calendar to look at what that policy is going to look like for downstairs. But of course it will be a reduced rate. I mean, it's not going to be the full rate that we would charge a theatre or a commercial vendor who's charging it onto a customer. So of course it's going to be a reduced rate. But of course there'll have to be fees that will need to be paid. So because we have to turn the lights on, you know. But the policy has always been that the church does not charge members for use of the sanctuary for weddings and memorials. In fact, we really don't charge people who hold a memorial here, a memorial, not a wedding, but a memorial here at all. But we do ask them to pay the officiant and the people who have to run light and sound, because they're giving their time. You know, that's not part of their volunteer jobs. And there are times where we've asked those same people to volunteer for a particular event. And they have, because they get paid at other times for other things. So budget. So that's where our income is hopefully going to be derived from. And then, of course, the expenses. We're projecting expenses of $673,325, which if we attain all of that will give us a surplus of $26,625. And to answer Art's question, any residue income would then go back into the investment accounts to start building back up the accrual. Does that make sense? Which I think is actually about 2.5%, give or take. Someone's better at maths than I am. Just on the facilities income, not on the rest.
I might have missed this, but does the board have any other additional fundraising plans, like for major fundraisers other than Illuminate thing?
Yeah. So what we have been investing in this year, in projection for hopefully 2015, may not be happening in 2015, may happen in 2016, but our hope is in 2015. Is that in 2014, we put 10 to 15 people through peer congregational training. And part of the reason for doing that was that we could then begin to establish a contract with the county of Los Angeles to provide peer counseling and peer evaluation stuff around mental health, coming out directly from the President Obama's healthcare initiative. And so this year, Reverend Cademan and Bishop Bonney have been writing our master grant for the County of Los Angeles. And if we're accepted onto the county draft of the County of Los Angeles, we will be able to open and establish a bilingual English and Spanish mental health service from our congregation through the Metropolitan Community Charities. That master grant then would free up income, because a lot of the programming that we already do out of this congregation, which we pay for out of our budget, actually could be paid for out of a master grant with the County of Los Angeles. So the board is looking at ways in which we diversify the way in which we both have income, but also how we attribute expenses. Because everything we do right now comes out of our tithes and offerings. We have very little, apart from our dividend income, we have very little fundraising income. It's not something this congregation has been good at, quite honestly. We've tried to do fundraisers, and sometimes they've cost us more than they've brought in. You know, we're just not a congregation that likes to do fundraising. And so grants have always been difficult for us to get. This is probably the best shot we've had in quite some time at getting on a master grant and then diversifying the way we get income. Can you tell me how much that would be?
If we get two contracts, one for English speaking and one for Spanish, it would be a total of $200,000.
Yeah, $200,000. And part of what we would then have to look at is how do we house those programs? And so the board has already has already thought about that. There are two options available to it. One is to reclaim space within the building. That's as much as I'm going to say about that. And the other option is for us to actually find office space within a short distance of the building where we could actually open a self-contained facility and use the grant, and then actually use some of that money for salaries and for programming. It would still be part of the church in its broadest sense. So there's lots and lots of ways in which we're thinking about that could happen. So fundraising is not necessarily in its traditional way of bake sales, but actually something much, much bigger about getting some kind of grants through the charities. And I received confirmation actually just before the meeting to let me know that the Metropolitan Community Charities is now completely reactivated at the state level. So we're back in compliance with the state, which is a great thing. We were out of compliance because the charities piece of our church had not been used for, well, it's actually since Nancy left. And so the Metropolitan Community Charities is a foundation of the church, and basically what it means is that there are many organizations that will not give to churches because of religious bias, but the charities is a separate wing that has a separate mandate around providing mental health and around providing other services that are not religious based, and so you have a much better chance of receiving money to a foundation than you do as a congregation. Although some of that has changed since the President George Bush time, when the faith-based initiative monies were being allocated. So, Bishop Bonnie Radden. Bishop Bonnie is a bishop in the fellowship churches, and she sits on the mental health commission for the county, and she's also pastor of Refiners Fire UCC congregation in Orange County. And she actually was the person who really invited us on to the mental health peer congregational training with this in eye, that we would then be able to provide this at a county level.
She also has a master contract. So
Yeah, they have a master contract with their church, so they've been helping us write ours. So between Reverend Cademan and Bishop Bonnie, they've been writing it and getting it ready to be submitted. So as far as expenses are concerned, let me just, because I know that there are probably a couple of questions, at least I'm sure. You will see that under the payroll section that I've put, there are 2 zeros next to Minister of, it should be TV, not YV, Minister of TV and Web Ministry and Office Manager. That was just to show you that those are the 2 salaries that we cut in 2013 and are not replacing in 2015. Sorry, we cut in 2014, not replacing in 15. And that we've been moving to a more contract style of labor. And the reason why, and there is a note here, why the $300,000 is put there and not each person's salary, is because the members of staff have not received a pay increase for 4 years. And so there is a hope that we can adjust that in 2015. We didn't want to put those individual salaries in those lines, because then staff might anticipate that that's what they're going to be paid in 2015. And so we just put a ballpark figure so that the board had the flexibility to spend up to that amount. And that $300,000, of course, includes payroll taxes, includes health insurance, includes all sorts of things. So staff should not be taking that $300,000, dividing amongst themselves and thinking what they're going to earn in 2015. although that would be lovely. But that's why there's no individual figures next to each person. So then turning over on the front side, you will see that under contract labor, there are a whole slew of new places, new placeholders. Bookkeeping, you'll see, went from 4,200 to 12,000. That's because when we released Louis from his responsibilities, we added to the responsibilities for the CPA and bookkeeper. And so that's on a contract labor. So all these new positions, website, that is a contract labor. We now have a contract person who in December will launch our new website, and will be very different than what we have had over the years. It's still in the making, but and they will be on a contract year by year to provide for ongoing updates, website, making sure that everything is up there and done correctly. Video and TV is now on a contract with Rainbow Sounds and Lights, and they contract with us for a certain number of hours every month. If they use those hours in that month, that's the same bill. If they don't use those hours in that month, they're banked. So that when we have times when we need more hours, we banked hours, which actually happened this month. We banked hours, ready for things like anniversary, things like all sorts of times when we need more video and technology hours. Admin for English, that's the PJ. And starting in November, admin for Spanish. We've included a new member of staff, Jose Miranda, who's going to be providing admin for Spanish. One of the things that Alex has always done is his own bulletins and his own programming and his own stuff. It's been increasingly impossible for him to do that whilst also working part-time for the denomination. So we've now recruited an admin person in Spanish, who will do the bulletins, do all the minutiae that he used to do. And starting in November. Clergy intern for this year, of course, is Tori Topjin, but we're putting that in the budget now because we want to anticipate having clergy interns and paying them for the time that they spend here. They often give well above and beyond of what they are doing, and so that's now in the budget. And of course our new church organist that plays at the 9 o'clock service and the Wednesday evening mass. I know that there are some folks who want the organist at 11 o'clock as well, and there will be some opportunity for that to happen, but we're not putting it in the budget for 2015 yet. It may be that the organist may want to volunteer once a month to play at the 11 o'clock service. But currently we pay the organist for the 9 o'clock service and the Wednesday evening mass, and is doing a great job so far. So those are the new places, and that money that we're using almost equates to, actually it's just a little under what we were paying for those two positions to include healthcare, payroll taxes, and all the rest of it. So the board gave me permission to use the budget that was approved in 2014 for payroll and just move it over to contract staff so that we could start to recruit some people and get some of the jobs done that we have been either extending other members of staff to do or just weren't being done because we didn't have the resources all the time. Any questions about all of that? Then any questions about anything? So once we've approved the budget, Dennis, and see, I was just coming to the cut.
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. Neil has been very gracious here, saying the board recommended this, and the board suggested this, and and many of those suggestions about how to find many of those things have come from Neil, and especially when we get to this idea about how much money we saved and how we reduced our expenses. Much of that much of the appreciation for that has to go to Neil and the staff. And I just want to say that as a board member, even though I've sort of only part of the year here, it's been very obvious that the staff and Neil have worked very hard, of course from the direction of the congregation and the board, but they're the ones who have accomplished the reduction in expenses that have put us in the good position that we are now. And I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you.
My name's Tammy Irons, and I don't know if I've missed the discussion about the parking. I heard a comment that was rather, in Reverend Barber's words, disappointing to me, and then I looked at the money, how much it does cost us. So is the $15,000 for parking, is that for the whole year just on Sundays? Okay. I missed a big conversation because I was around here hiking up the hill looking for my car because I had to move it after an hour. I would rather not, as a congregant, have to get up in the middle of the meeting on a Saturday and move my car because I miss part of it. So that's my feedback. And when I looked at the amount of money that it costs us, that was distressing and disappointing too. Is there any way to solve that? Because if I'm doing that, how many others? And we have a 300-member church here, and when it comes to meetings like this, and this is always, for me, I've always been disappointed at the attendance, as I'm sure you are, and I'm looking for, looking, it costs a lot, but is that a price we have to pay to attract people versus staying at home or versus more accessible parking? I know that might be redundant. I just wanted to say it.
I appreciate it. I mean, parking is a problem everywhere in LA, no matter where you go. And most of us, if we go out to a restaurant or we go somewhere, we have to valet park. It's the way it is in Los Angeles. As a building, we are landlocked. There is nowhere around this facility unless we were to buy up half the block and demolish the homes and put in tarmac for us to park 24/7. I always recommend to people if they are coming here during the week and want to park, that they park at the Barnsdale Park. It's 2 blocks. I know that that's 2 blocks, but Barnsdale Park is empty, and you don't have to move it after an hour. And the only day that you can't do that is usually on a Monday when they have the market. But Barnsdale Park is the place to park if you're coming during the week. It's a 5-minute walk. If you're coming in the evening, Barnsdale Park's open till 10 o'clock. Not many of our meetings go beyond 10 o'clock in the evening. And so, yeah. And most of us are quite used to paying $3 or $4 for valet parking. And so you can valet park at Bank of America, you can valet park at Dresden, you can valet park, and then there is that wonderful, wonderful secret parking that is $2 for 10 hours between Kingswell and whatever it is. And it's $2 for 10 hours of parking. It's the city block. And so, parking will always be an issue. We pay $300 a month, $300 a week for the Dresden parking, for 45 parking spaces. And, you know, between Dresden and Bank of America and Barnsdale, there's over 100 parking spaces.
Is that a 7-day?
No, that's just for Sundays. Barnsdale is 24/7 free. And, you know, we publish it, we let people know, we put it in almost every publication we put out there, because we know parking's an issue. And if we would choose to, if those of us who are able-bodied, if we would choose to park in those places, that frees up parking for those who are less able-bodied, and certainly for people with strollers and those things that need to be closer. But it's our good stewardship on all levels to try and get our cars off the street, to free it up for the visitor, for the people who need the parking. But just like everywhere, we want convenience. And so if we find a spot, we're going to park. And $300 a week for parking for a Sunday till 2 o'clock in the afternoon is, you know, actually not that bad. I think it averages out about $2 a car when you flip the cars, you know, 3 times. Lucia?
I actually have another budget-related question, but since we love to talk about parking, is it possible for us to apply to get another handicap spot?
We already have.
We have?
Mhm.
Okay.
Still waiting.
Still.
City takes a while.
I'll be well by then.
What we've actually done, Lucia, we've actually applied for that whole strip to come back. But we've not heard anything back yet. Yeah.
Are we ready? We ready for another budget-related question then? I don't see quite in the paperwork where notes 3, 4, and 5 are referenced in the actual line items, but regarding note 5,
yep.
And speaking as a person from the Archives Committee, I appreciate very much that the board is going to include those expenses as we're able. However, some of those expenses are regarding immediate needs. Is there any way to address some of those things, like by drip, 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 if we can't get a whole thing at one time?
Yep. And that's exactly what the board said on Thursday. First of all, we wanted to make sure that we had the note in the agenda, in the budget, so that it was part of the official record. And the same question came up: what happens if the archives or congregational care need money immediately? Absolutely, drip by drip. Okay, I actually want to say that I thought this was a great representation of the congregation today. When I look at the way in which business meetings happen in churches that continue to get larger, they say that usually it's about, 5 to 10% of the congregation who really are invested in the business of the church. So I'm actually not disappointed by the attendance today. I actually think it's actually one of the better forums that we've had since we've been doing forums. So I want to appreciate that. And I just want to say the conversation I think you stepped into was not about parking, it was about the lower level. And the income that we're, yeah, that's okay. No, I just wanted to and we can have that conversation later. But I think this has been a great congregational forum. I hope you found that you've had your questions answered. I hope that you've seen some transparency. I hope you appreciate the amount of work that the board have done over the last 12 months to get us to where we are today. And I think the future is pretty exciting as we see the potential. Yeah, there'll be some sacrifices. There'll be some compromises. There'll be some places where we might not, agree with priorities. But I think that overall, if we can come back next year and see that this all worked, we'll be pretty happy campers. And we'll learn what it means to coexist with other groups, as we have done with a facility that didn't have a lower level. And I'm very excited about what 2015 has the potential to look like as we move forward. So with that hope And with that anticipation, I hope that you're ready to be at the congregational meeting next Sunday, not tomorrow, next Sunday. So no absentee ballots. No, sorry. I know you're serving the Lord. So could I ask Reverend Caven to close us in prayer?
Let's pray. God, we thank you for this opportunity